Hey, Margie, are you ready to delve into red light therapy? Most people have heard of it, know it can help, but have no idea how to really use it. Well, today you're going to learn what it is, what conditions can it help, what the research has shown, and what do we need to know to use it effectively. So I am so excited about our special guest, Ari Whitten. And Ari is the founder of the Energy Blueprint and the best-selling author of The Ultimate Guide to Red Light Therapy and Eat for Energy. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science and a Master of Science in Human Nutrition and Functional Medicine. But over 20 years of consulting and teaching, he's become passionate for evidence-based natural health. And he's done so much work and he's helped thousands of people worldwide optimize their health, energy, and longevity, and has spent so much time and effort researching red light therapy that there is just no one better to talk to us about this. And he gives us really fabulous information in this interview. So stay tuned. Welcome, Ari. I'm so happy to have you here on the podcast. I get asked about red light therapy all the time. And when I saw that you had a new book out, I had to contact you and get you back on the podcast because there's really a lot of things to talk about. And this helps so many people. So I'm so excited that we can really delve in and really say what's true and what people need to know so that people can use this device to really help themselves. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me back on. It's always a joy to chat with you.
So let's just start from the beginning because not everybody, people have seen these devices and they hear that it's good. But can you actually explain, what are we talking about when we talk about, red light therapy?
It's a good question. It's a simple question. It's also a really big question. So I can give you a 20-minute answer, or I can give you a very succinct answer. Maybe I'll give you the short one
The
first.
short one.
Uh,
Yeah, let's start with the short. We'll make this
so
simple.
red light is what it sounds like. It is literally light that is the red color. So let me and there's another category here called near infrared light. So it's really red and near infrared light. And these two parts of the spectrum of light or the electromagnetic spectrum are acting through mostly the same or very overlapping mechanisms to do very similar things in the body. So we kind of lump these two things together, red and near infrared light. Now, what are they? It's light that is in a particular part of the spectrum. We'll address red light more simply first, okay? So we have on as human beings on planet Earth, we are exposed to the sun. And part of what the sun emits, part of the electromagnetic spectrum that the sun emits is what's called visible light. Okay? And this is light that is the colors of the rainbow. Okay, so Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And that is the part of the electromagnetic spectrum that the human visual system has evolved to be able to see. So when we think of light, that's light. It's these colors of light. And there are also parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that are outside of what the human visual system has evolved to detect. So part of the ultraviolet light spectrum is largely invisible. And then after you get through those colors of the rainbow, the visible light spectrum, on the other side of it is infrared light. Okay, so near infrared, mid infrared, far infrared, all of which has various impacts or interaction with us, and could be as simple as just heating our tissues, being absorbed by water and creating heat. And that's all part of the spectrum of sunlight that is invisible to our visual system. Okay, so what we're talking about here when it comes to quote unquote red light therapy, the proper term now is actually photobiomodulation. And what we're talking about is photo means light, bio is biology, life, and modulation is what it sounds like. So we are using light to change biology. And what this is really about is that certain parts of the light spectrum interact with human biology. They are bioactive. Okay. And this is kind of a novel way of thinking Most of us are not used to thinking about light this way. We're used to, we're trained to think about food and exercise and things like that as being meaningful to biology. We're not used to thinking about light interacting with our cells in any sort of direct way. The main ways that we are now starting to get used to that idea is the vitamin D story. Most people have some vague awareness that light from the sun is creating some chemical in their body called vitamin D that impacts on musculoskeletal health, that impacts on immune health, and so on. We know that that is really important. People have a vague idea that that's tied to the sun, or maybe they know a bit more about the mechanisms of how certain parts of the UV spectrum create this chemical reaction that leads to the synthesis of vitamin D. And the other way we know about this story is circadian rhythm, primarily the blue wavelengths of visible light and how those feed back through the eyes into receptors that transmit signals to the brain, to the part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is where our circadian clock lives, our 24-hour biological clock. And that impacts all kinds of metabolic and hormonal processes, touching directly or indirectly basically everything in our body. And so we can conceptualize these parts of the light spectrum, in the case of ultraviolet, in the case of blue light, as being bioactive, as interacting with our biology through these mechanisms. But there is another part of the light spectrum that is sort of, now it's becoming more well known, but it is red and near infrared light. And these interact with our biology in a totally different way from ultraviolet light and from blue light in the circadian rhythm. They actually are penetrating into our body beneath the skin and directly interacting with cells, where the short version is they do all kinds of cool stuff that is very beneficial to health. And from there, we can talk in detail about what all those cool things are.
Oh, I love that. I mean, the truth is you have an entire book on this, but we want to just get to which really goes into everything in such detail. So the thing is, what I love about this, Ari, is that it's actually real science. It's backed by so many studies. So we're not just talking, oh, maybe it will help, maybe it won't help. There's actual research on this, which I think so important and really validates how we can use these devices to really make a big difference. So, since this whole podcast is about bones, let's start with that because I know in your book you have a section on bones. So, what have they found in terms of how we could use this light to help our bones?
Let me give context first. So, the context is that red and near infrared light have been shown in, at this point, over 6,000 studies, but in many, many different contexts to stimulate mechanisms at the cellular level that are involved in healing and regeneration of tissues. Okay. And that is sort of the broad context. And that is really one of the key things, if not the key thing, that red and near infrared light do. They trigger mechanisms at the cellular level that stimulate cellular growth, repair, regeneration processes. Okay. So within that context are lots of different kinds of tissues. Okay, we can look at how that affects muscle tissue and tendon tissue. We can look at how it affects skin. We can look at how it affects nerves. We can look at how it affects bones. And there's research on all of those things. So one of the more robust areas of research within the realm of bone health specifically is in the realm of dentistry. This has been used, lasers, red and near infrared light lasers have been used in dentistry for many, many years, decades at this point. And now it's very robust. There's all kinds of amazing technologies that are in use to either perform laser surgeries or to use lasers, lower level lasers that red and near infrared light that are involved in stimulating healing of tissues of gums and of bones. And the research there is very robust, where in the context of surgeries, maybe they're damaging bones, maybe they're doing tooth implants, they're digging into the bone, doing root canals, any kind of dental work where you're digging into the bones, periodontal disease, things like that. What has been shown in at least dozens, if not hundreds of studies on that subject, is that very clearly red and near infrared light have a powerful bone stimulating regenerative effect. They increase bone density, they increase the rate of bone healing after bone injuries, and so on. the other body of evidence is in the context of not quite as robust, but still there's definitely plenty of studies on orthopedic bone injuries, fractures. You got a broken arm. There's one study, for example, where they basically made an opening in the cast and then shined light directly in there onto a broken arm during the healing process, and they found that it significantly sped the rate of healing, it reduced pain, and had a number of other beneficial effects. And basically, let's see, for this specific study, this double-blind, randomized controlled trial, they showed that shining the near-infrared light through the cast opening increased the active range of motion and grip strength while also reducing the loss in grip strength compared to the uninjured arm. It also reduced the level of pain experienced during the night. So, it's sort of providing this pleiotropic effect. It's affecting multiple different mechanisms, reducing pain and inflammation, and speeding healing of various tissues involved in these injuries.
Hey, Margie here. As a physical therapist, I know firsthand how important exercise is for our bones, overall health, and happiness. And unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion on what exercises are safe and effective for people with osteoporosis. That's why I created this handout that contains a 30-minute video where I explain the concepts so you understand the do's and don'ts when it comes to exercise. And this is important because this way you can go into any class and know what you should be doing and what you should avoid. Because too many people are doing exercises that actually increase their risk of spinal fractures. I also included videos of me demonstrating effective balance, posture, and weight-bearing exercises you can put into your day right away. So all you need to do to access this handout, it's free, is go to tinyurl.com/osteoporosis exercises. So it's tinyurl.com /osteoporosis exercises, or you can click the link in the show notes. Now back to the show. That's great. So what have you found like for people listening, what would you say are the main things they could use this red light therapy for? I know I just recently, I had a cough, and I coughed so hard that I actually injured the intercostal muscles near my rib. And so every single day I use the red light therapy, which really helped. It really made a big difference in
Yeah.
how it felt.
To be honest, this is actually the first time I'm talking about the bone side of things. I've never been asked about it, and I've never, personally had an interest. I have great bone health, so it's not really top of mind for me. I had a lot of fractures as a kid. It would have been relevant to me then, but in general, I've never used it, for the purpose of affecting bones. Actually, there is something that I talk extensively about using it on bones, but for a different purpose we can talk about. So the context that I'm interested in personally, and there are many. This has been used in the context of brain health, combating dementia. This has been used in the context of immune health. This has been used in the context of healing injuries of all kinds. This has been used in the context of facial skin anti-aging, enhancing athletic performance, enhancing recovery from exercise, increasing the adaptations to exercise, weight loss, improving body composition, improving hormonal health, improving sleep, hair loss, like on and on and on. There's many contexts. So I would say for me personally, the biggest ones are I'm prone to hair loss, so I like using it for that purpose. I like to look beautiful, so I use it on my face and to hopefully prevent accelerated skin wrinkling. I also spend a ton of time in the sun because I'm a surfer, so I like to give myself a little benefit in that regard. I use it for not so much enhancing performance during exercise. Usually I don't do it before exercise, though that is a good way to use it, especially if you like compete in athletics. But I use it often after exercise to enhance recovery and to amplify the benefits. There's really robust research showing that it synergizes with exercise really well and amplifies the various kinds of metabolic adaptations and amplifies also the local tissue level adaptations as far as muscle hypertrophy, for example, muscle strength, as well as amplifying endurance adaptations to exercise. And you recover faster. So I think it's one of the best things that you can possibly do if you are into fitness and exercising. I think pairing it with red and near infrared light is amazing. Just a way to boost the overall benefits that you get. For example, there was a study done where I talk about this in the book, where they basically looked at one group that does exercise alone, another group that does the same exercise regimen, but did red and near infrared light after the sessions on their muscles. And what they showed is not only benefits to body composition, but also hormonal benefits as far as improvements in metabolic benefits and as far as improvements in insulin sensitivity. And it was not a small effect. It was almost like an 80 or 100% increase beyond exercise alone by doing red and near infrared light with it, both in terms of body composition and in terms of insulin sensitivity. So there's really robust research. I'm a big fan of that. And the other main context that I use it is healing injuries. So I'm an athlete. I surf, I do tennis, I rock climb, I lift weights. I was doing martial arts for a long time. I'm not currently, but doing jujitsu and capoeira. And you get strains and you get injuries. I rolled my ankle pretty badly a couple months ago on a tennis ball, stepping on a tennis ball and the ankle rolling over it. And yeah, this stuff is a lifesaver. I mean, it just, and the research is very robust on this, like done in college athletes, for example, where they take one group who sprain their ankle and they do the normal physical therapy stuff, and the other group adds red and near infrared light therapy. And what they show as a generalization is they generally show like 50% improvements or more in the rate of healing. So if it would normally take you 4 weeks to get back on the field, now it only takes like 2 weeks. So it's very effective in speeding the rate of healing of injuries as well.
Wow, this is in terms of I just see so many things that people can use this for. Number one, this community exercise is absolutely essential and heavy duty exercise. I mean, we're doing strength training, we're really doing things to stimulate the bone. So the fact that it can at all enhance the exercise is amazing, number one. Number two, people have issues. People have back pain, people have knee pain, people have, I saw some of the studies on the knee, it was incredible, but people have issues and the pain is really impeding them from even, from the exercise program. So I see in terms of pain modulation, or if someone, overdoes it and they need to heal up, which happened with me with, by coughing. It's just I just see so many applications, and it's something that people can do at home, which I love. It's not that you have to go to physical therapy or you have to go somewhere else. You can do, you can do this something you can have at home and even do that, which is so great. So a bunch of things. Okay, so for everybody listening, they're like, "Oh gosh, well, where would I start?" Someone who's like, "Oh, this sounds amazing." Like, what's the simplest entry point to this?
It really depends on, so let me put it this way. The part of my book that is devoted to device selection, how to actually use these devices to do various things, is like 100 pages long. Okay. Now it's 100 pages long, not because the answer to every individual question is so complex, such that it requires 100 pages of explanation, but because there are so many nuances and different contexts and different treatment goals and different types of devices and ways of using them and how to dose them and so on. There's a lot of nuances to getting this right. This is further complicated by the fact that the industry itself that makes these devices is kind of like the Wild West at this point. It's so unregulated. There are so many false and misleading claims. There's so much overt lying and misrepresentation of the technical aspects of the device and simple measures of like how much light it actually emits, that there's a lot of nuances to this answer. It's not as simple as just go buy any device and use it. Now, with that said, with the fact that there's a lot of nuance and complexity, we can break this down very simply by saying, well, number one, what is your actual goal? Okay. There, as I mentioned before, there are lots of different kinds of goals. And this can be very simple where you say, hey, my number one goal is I want to fight hair loss. I don't want to go bald, or I want to help regrow my hair. Okay, well, it's in 10 seconds, I can tell you what devices to go get for that purpose and which are the best ones and why. If your goal is facial skin anti-aging, I can tell you which are the best devices and why that is the case, and why it's better than other types of devices. If your goal is you have a lot of knee pain and osteoarthritis, I can tell you which are the best devices for that purpose. The But first, and they are in general, depending on the goal that you have, it is different choices of devices in most cases that are going to be best for that. Now, there's two broad categories in terms of principles here. One is local body part specific effects, and the other one is systemic effects. Okay, so there's two layers of how this technology actually works in our physiology. One is the direct interaction of light photons with the target tissue that you are trying to affect. Okay, so let's say, as a simple example, let's say I've got a wound on my skin, on my elbow. I want to shine light directly on that wound to stimulate healing of those cells. I've got photons of light directly interacting with those skin cells, and I'm creating an effect in that specific tissue directly. The other aspect of how this technology works, which is quite interesting and is currently kind of underappreciated, but I can tell you that from talking to some of the top experts in the world, that they actually think this might be the more important aspect of how this technology works, is actually through indirect systemic effects, meaning not the light directly interacting with the target tissue, but interacting with whole body systemic mechanisms. And there are a few layers of how those systemic effects work, and they're quite interesting. But one of them is, some of them are blood mediated effects, things that are change in circulation. Some of them are nervous system mediated effects. Some of them are immune mediated effects, and some of them are stem cells. Okay, and I think stem cells might be the most interesting one, and is one that is currently, we don't have a ton of research on. I think it's kind of an emerging understanding, but basically there are studies that show that shining light on, for example, one of the most well-known studies in this area is a study where they used an animal model and they induced a heart attack, they induced damage to the heart, a myocardial infarction. And then they shined light on the tibia of these rodents, and they showed that it dramatically increased the amount of stem cells in circulation, and that those stem cells ended up in the heart to repair that damaged tissue in the heart. Okay.
Wow.
So that kind of effect. There's also another layer to this at the immune level, which is there's a shift in macrophages from an M1 pro-inflammatory phenotype to an M2 anti-inflammatory, more healing and regenerative phenotype. And that is a whole body blood mediated systemic effect. So what's happening at the level of the entire system when you use this kind of red and near infrared light is the initial layer of whatever direct interaction of photons of light with the target tissue, but then this whole body systemic effect where a cascade of mechanisms are initiated that then can trigger healing effects throughout the entire body. The other one I want to mention is growth factor cascades. So one of the mechanisms of how light interacts with our cells is through TGF beta 1, which is an important growth factor in healing. And as a recent scientific discovery just in the last few years, it's been shown that is actually one of the mechanisms of where the light photons first interact with the cells. So it's a true mechanism, quote unquote, meaning as distinct from like downstream cascades of mechanisms, the true mechanism is where the photons of light directly first interact with the cell, what's absorbing them to trigger some effect in our biology. And one of these recent discoveries by a guy named Dr. Praveen Arani, who I've had on my podcast to discuss this, is TGF beta 1. It's this really important growth factor that lies essentially dormant or latent in our cells, and then the light photons from red and near infrared light essentially activate it. They switch it on. And then this TGF beta 1 sort of goes to work in stimulating repair and regeneration processes. What's interesting is also that it triggers a cascade of other growth factors. And we have lots of growth factors that are specific to various tissues: vascular endothelial growth factor, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, nerve growth factor. We have IGF-1 in our muscles. We have all these tissue-specific growth factors, and they're all tied into this story of TGF-beta 1, where you essentially create these cascades of growth factor responses in response to light therapy, and there is a whole body systemic increase in growth factors as well.
Wow, this is just really so exciting. Something you said, though, I thought was very disconcerting about that companies are misleading consumers about the specs. And, I remember my aunt said to me, who has knee issues, "Oh, I ordered red light therapy, on Amazon for, very inexpensive." And it's not all the same. And I think that's so wonderful about your book that you really explain anything. But what should people really look out for?
There's a few things. There are areas where, basically, in an effort to differentiate their device from other devices, companies are making various kinds of claims and trying to modify their device in certain ways to claim the superiority of their device versus another. Maybe they claim, competitors only have 2 wavelengths and we have 4. Or, then it became competitors only have 4 wavelengths and we have 6. And then it became competitors only have 6 wavelengths and we have 8. Another example of this is irradiance, light intensity. Okay, basically, like, how much light does the device actually emit? There became a race to the top of who can create the most powerful possible device. And so some company said, we have 100 milliwatts per square centimeter. Then another company said, well, we have 110, and so on. And so companies kind of got engaged in this competition of who has the highest irradiance. They started working with their manufacturers in China to produce the highest power possible device. And that's the biggest one I might come back to. Another example of this is pulse rates. You'll see people saying, well, pulsing has been shown to be superior. We made our LED panels that pulse, and therefore they're better than the non-pulsing ones. Or ours pulse at these very specific Nogier frequencies, where 100, whatever the numbers are, 173 hertz corresponds to nervous system tissue regeneration, and 587 hertz corresponds to muscle tissue regeneration. And we've programmed these specific healing pulse rates into our device. And so, broadly speaking, we have all kinds of claims like this that are, speaking with broad brushstrokes, they are largely detached from the actual body of evidence. So companies basically making claims that are essentially marketing gimmicks that have no science underneath them, or very little science. In some cases, it leads to actually doing counterproductive things. So by trying to have the device with the most wavelengths, for example, I've seen companies now start including blue wavelengths, blue LEDs in their what's supposed to be red and near infrared light therapy device. And there's quite a bit of research showing that blue has, in some cases, in some tissues, opposite effects to red and near infrared. For example, at the level of the eyes or at the level of the skin, blue light tends to be oxidative, tends to be pro-aging, and is generally associated with sort of cellular damage, whereas red and near infrared light tend to be healing and regenerative to those tissues. So in the effort to try to claim superiority of your device based on the number of wavelengths, now you're doing sort of overtly counterproductive things. But the biggest one, by far, is this rampant issue of lying about the actual irradiance, light output of the device. Some of this many years ago was actually innocent. It was companies, I don't necessarily need to get too detailed, but the kinds of devices that we were using to measure the light intensity from these devices, that even for me that I was using, are called solar power meters, these at-home devices. And it turned out later, we sort of all found out that actually those devices overestimate the irradiance by about 30 to 50%. And so all the numbers that everybody was sharing were actually way overestimated, in many cases by about double. Okay, so if you claimed your irradiance of your device was 100 milliwatts per square centimeter, the actual irradiance might be 50 or 55, which is a very big difference and very meaningful, and is also very important for getting the dosing right. You need to know those numbers accurately. So now this knowledge is known. Everybody's aware of it. All the manufacturers are aware of this issue, but many of them are still lying about their irradiance to claim that they have the highest irradiance. Now, within that, there is still a further nuance, which is in some cases, higher irradiance, in many cases, higher irradiance is generally better, okay? Especially if you're trying to treat deep tissues like joints or bones or muscles or tendons or something like that. However, in other contexts, especially skin and facial skin in particular, a higher irradiance may actually be counterproductive. You actually want a fairly low or moderate irradiance, not a high one. So you have all these companies basically saying, we have the highest power device, our device is the most powerful and that makes it the best. Well, if you use it on your facial skin, having a super powerful device isn't necessarily a good thing.
Wow. Well, it's really great. Let's talk about your book because you really clear it up so people can know what to do and why. It's very funny. I don't think I told you this. So your first book, I'm trying to think how many, I guess it was around 7 years ago, right? Your first book that you wrote. I was at the conference.
2018.
Yeah, I was at the conference with you, oh, even more, and you were giving it out, and so I read it on the plane home, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is amazing." It was such a good book and just went into so many things. So what has happened in the past 7 years that you really felt the need to rewrite this and add so much more information?
Yeah, a lot. There's a lot to this answer. Let me speak to actually kind of segueing off what I was just discussing. One of the things that I've done in this book is to try to clean up all of these problems in the industry. And the way that I've done that is I've worked with a third-party lab in Pennsylvania called Light Lab International. And I had companies who make these devices send their panels to this lab so we could have actually legitimate third-party lab data using very advanced equipment that gives us the real numbers. And I've published that data so people can see what the real numbers are of these devices, see through all the misleading claims. I've also specifically tried to encourage people to only buy from manufacturers of devices that share third-party lab data showing the true irradiance of their device. So don't buy from anybody who isn't willing to share actual third-party lab data. That is a huge red flag that should tell you they are either lying or they're ignorant of this information. For a major manufacturer, most likely they're lying. They want to hide the true numbers, in other words. So don't do business with them. I'm basically trying to clean up the industry and giving a big incentive to companies to be transparent and communicating to the consumers that they should only do business with companies who are willing to share that third-party lab data. So that's one big thing that I'm trying to do, is clean up the industry as a whole so that it's more ethical and honest and transparent. But for the consumer, what I'm also trying to do is help them navigate this wild west of all these wacky claims and a million different types of devices and all this science. One of the big problems in the science is, yes, there's 6,000 studies, but there's so much diversity and variation in the types of devices used and in the dosing parameters that it's really hard to know, well, for a particular purpose, what type of device should I actually use and how do I dose it to get a certain benefit? So I'm breaking all of that science down into a set of very simple how-to principles. Okay, if you want to achieve this type of goal, then here's the type of device that you should get. Here's why. Here are the principles and the logic of why you should choose this type of device, and here's exactly how to dose it. Okay, so I'm sort of making sense of this gigantic mess of complexity and putting it all into very simple principles. And then the other reason is of course just that time passes and this whole space has exploded. So there's, I don't know, probably a few thousand more studies since the original version of my book that have come out. Many of them are highly significant and advance our understanding. And so my book, for various reasons from 2018, was just very outdated. Outdated as far as the science, outdated as far as the mechanisms, outdated as far as the device recommendations and the logic of how to use them properly. And I just wanted to provide a massive upgrade, which I've done.
Yeah, it's really amazing, and what a service to all of us because, as I said, my aunt was trying to help her niece, and she just ordered people don't know, they just group it, "Okay, I'll buy red light therapy," and I'll see what's on Amazon, boom, and they have no idea, and there's so much, as you said, so much involved, so I commend you and really grateful for all this work that you've done that you're able to share with everybody so that they do have a roadmap that they can say, "Okay, this makes sense. I wanna help my wrinkles. This is what I'll do." And I love the fact that even cognitive have you what have you seen with with improving cognition and, other things, mental things? What have you seen with your experience?
Well, actually, before I answer that, I want to say one more thing about the redoing of this book. I had been meaning to redo it for several years, actually, and kind of postponing it. I just were busy with other stuff. And because my book from 2018, my timing was really good, and it was just before the whole industry blew up, and I just kind of was like, I'd been studying this topic for 5 or 6 years. I was like, I feel like this is really important, but nobody's paying attention to it. Nobody's written a book on it. Maybe I should write a book. And I kind of threw this thing together pretty quickly, and it became the top book in the world on the subject, and it has remained the most popular books for the last 7 years. So about a year ago, Penguin Random House, one of the top book publishers in the world, reached out to me with an offer to do version two. And I was like, well, as a matter of fact, I've already been thinking about it and working on it for a while. So yes, I'd love to. And then another cool thing happened, which is I was doing consultations with this guy. There
Yeah,
we go.
there we go.
Okay. This
Photomed.
is a clinical textbook, the Handbook of Photomedicine. And the author of this is Dr. Michael Hamblin. He's the most prolific scientist in the world on this subject, has been for decades, and probably the most well-known and respected authority in photobiomodulation. He's a former Harvard professor, now retired, and I was doing consultations with him in the process of writing this book to basically have him review all of my thoughts and material to make sure I wasn't getting anything wrong and to correct anything that I might be oversimplifying or misrepresenting or something, to show me my blind spots. And we developed a very fruitful relationship that ended up turning into him offering to be a co-author in the book. And so now I went from a self-published book that I just threw together to now like almost like a textbook, like a proper textbook. It's very robust. It's 400 pages of very dense information, published with Penguin Random House and with the top PBM scientist in the world as my co-author.
Well, what I have to say about this is when you do something for the right reason, I really believe this in my heart. When you do something for the right reason, the world sort of reacts. And you did the first book because you wanted to get this out to the world, whatever way you could. And you did, and it became so popular. Now this one, how amazing that you were able to work with work with him and combine your efforts so that the information is so science backed and so legitimate and everything's tested that people can really benefit. So I love sort of like your baby, you have a baby and then you send it out to the world and then you hear that this one's better from this and this one's better. So I can't wait to hear when people start using it properly what they're experiencing. As I said, it really just helped me recently with the more localized, but I've never used it. I've used it like localized muscle to like that. I haven't. I'm going to right after this start using it, figure out look at your book, figure out the best way to use it for my skin. Like, why would I not use it if it's going to help wrinkles? Like, that's like a no-brainer, I think. And
Totally. Yeah, one of
yeah,
the best way to do it is with a device.
well, let's
I,
see.
I don't I don't want to say I'm going to be careful with how I say it. A device like this in the sense of a facial mask. However, there are a lot of junk facial masks on the market. Most of them are junk. This one and a few others are an exception. But a device like this can just be worn for 10 minutes or so, and you still have eye slots so you can see and you can still do work or meditate or whatever you want to do. It doesn't need to take any time out of your day, and that's the best way to do
10 minutes a day?
that. Just be very careful not to get a junk device. You have to get one that is solid.
And you go through that in your book. So,
Yes. Yeah. One of the big issues, just as an example of why the difference, something that you can't tell from this side,
yeah,
from the outside of looking at the mask, that you can only tell from this side is, I don't know how well you can see
I
this,
can see
but
that really clearly, perfectly.
the LED density
Mhm.
of, let me show you this. The LED density of these LEDs in there, this one is one of the good ones, and it is extremely dense with LEDs. A lot of the junky ones have big spaces, like half an inch or an inch spaces between each LED. And what that does is you can't see it from the outside, but it creates hot spots and cold spots. Essentially, it creates areas where you have light on the skin and then a space where there's no light. So you don't have uniform light coverage. That's why you need the high density of the LEDs applied to the face, because you need uniform light coverage. You need that light hitting all the skin on your face, not just one little spot every inch.
Wow. What about other areas? I've seen different where sometimes there's little bulbs, but they're not right next to each other. There's like a little space. Does it matter for other areas of the body too?
Yeah, this criticism that I just explained, which
Ah,
is something that is almost not talked about at all
yeah.
online by anyone, and is not even sort of known by most people as an important factor in choosing devices, but it is a very important factor. It applies to basically almost all of the pad style devices on the market.
Wow.
Almost all of them, with like a couple of exceptions, almost all of them have this fundamental flaw where there's big spaces between each LED, and that will dramatically reduce the effectiveness of that device.
Wow. In terms of, do you ever see a difference? Because there's the pads and then there's the light box. Is there a big difference, or you would just use them like this is for the face? You're not going to put the light box.
The answer to that is that um, we have two basic types of goals. So I explained local versus systemic. Another sort of very much related overlapping concept is, if your goal is body part specific, what you want to prioritize is, how do I use a device that is very effective in delivering light to that body part? Okay. So that's why for facial skin anti-aging, there are reasons why I would choose a device like this over a light panel. Okay. And one of them has to do with the right irradiance. One of them has to do with getting the dosing right. One of them has to do with the ability of the device to conform to the body surfaces. So my face is not flat. It has curves to it. Okay. I have sides of my face. I have a front of my face. I've got a nose. I've got eye sockets. I've got all these curves. And the way that light interacts with surfaces, this is a principle of optics and physics that was first discovered in the 1800s. It's called Fresnel's equations. Basically, the angle of incidence of that light, the bigger the angle of incidence, which means the more angled it is as opposed to perpendicular to the surface. So the bigger that angle is, the more that light will tend to reflect off rather than penetrate. Okay, so in other words, for the front of my forehead here, I want light coming directly at it from the front. Okay, and that's okay. But if I have a light source that's shining light from only that source, well, now the sides of my face are going to have really big angles of incidence, and the penetration of light to those parts of my face is going to be way, way lower. In contrast, if I have a device that wraps around my face and conforms to the curves of my face, I can maintain much better perpendicularity of that light relative to the surface. And so the penetration absorption of that light is going to be much higher. Okay. So this is why in most cases, let's say facial skin anti-aging, let's say treating a knee joint, let's say treating the top of your head for hair loss, treating a muscle, something like that. In most cases, using a device that can conform to the body surface is generally, in principle, a better idea than using a flat panel from a distance away. Okay. Now, the other context where you might want to use red light therapy is not body part specific, but is sort of general wellness, health. I want to have more energy. I want to sleep better. I want to recover faster. Also using it on very large body parts, like let's say your whole back or your whole front torso. And in those kinds of contexts, what becomes more important is the total dose of light delivered to create a bigger systemic effect as opposed to a local effect directly on that tissue. We maximize the systemic effect. So total dose of light becomes much more important in that context. And for delivering a higher total dose of light, having a bigger device like a panel is very beneficial in comparison to, let's say, a facial mask or let's say a hair loss helmet or any other smaller targeted device. With a panel or a whole body pod, though I don't mention that. I don't talk about it much, not because it's not a good idea, but because they're tens of thousands of dollars. Most people wouldn't even consider it. They're great if you can. I do know I was at somebody's house the other day that has a $75,000 one in their house. So it does happen. But for most people, panels are the much more affordable option. And you can get a big, big dose of light from panels to sort of maximize some of those systemic effects
Wow.
that way.
Well, all right, this is amazing. I mean, so let's talk about your book. So what's also great, so tell people how they can get the book. First of all, we'll have this in the show notes as well.
Yeah, Margie, I just realized there's one thing I want to circle back to that's
Absolutely.
actually it was slightly related to bone,
Yeah.
somewhat related to bone that I mentioned earlier in passing. And I just want to complete that thought. It also ties into what we were just talking about as far as maximizing systemic effects. So one of the really interesting lines of research, it's been shown in animals and humans at this point, and that I think will be a really important, will turn out to be, let's say 5 or 10 years from now, will be regarded as one of the main mechanisms of how this technology works, is stem cells, releasing stem cells in circulation, like what I talked about before as far as the rodent study with the damage to the heart and stuff like that. What has been shown in numerous studies is that shining light on bones, on certain bones that are close to the surface, like the tibia, or like the front of the hips, or like maybe the sacrum or the sternum, these bones that when they're rich in stem cells, when you shine light on them with a powerful enough device directly on those bony processes, you can very likely, this is somewhat speculative, but it has the mechanism certainly been shown in many studies, you can release stem cells into circulation. And I do think that is likely to be one of the key mechanisms of systemic effects. So one layer to maximizing systemic effects is total dose of light delivered. But in addition to that, if you can also get a powerful light directly on the bones themselves, and I talk about how to do this in the book, you can also stimulate release of stem cells into circulation as well. And I think that that is probably likely to be a very good, doing that frequently is likely to be a very good overall anti-aging, longevity supportive practice.
Wow, this is so exciting. So just imagine when you come back in 7 years, what will have happened?
I know, right? Yeah, I know.
Well,
Hopefully there'll be a lot more clarity as far as the science, and I won't have to work so hard to make sense of it all.
I just give you so much credit because this is really it really changes lives. I mean, it's such a phenomenal tool, but as you said, no one knows how to use it, and there's so many issues that are really a problem with different companies. So good for you. I mean, you've just done something so amazing. Pat yourself on the back. All right, so people, how do they let's just talk about now getting the book, and then I think it's so you also offer these great bonuses. So just tell people about that because I think that's really something beyond even just getting the book.
I would recommend getting the book from Amazon. You can get it from any online bookseller of your choice. Barnes and Noble, everywhere has it. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Red Light Therapy. The In case there's any question, I think they're all sold out everywhere of the old 2018 version. That version has a white cover. The new version is a red cover. And the new version also lists Dr. Michael Hamblin as my co-author. So look for the 2026 version rather than the 2018 version, red rather than white. If you get the paperback, the hard copy, not paperback, the hardcover edition, then just email my support team, support at theenergyblueprint.com. And we've got a whole stack of bonuses like free 30-day access to our, like a couple of our $500 programs and all kinds of cool stuff like that. So yeah, that's a nice little amazing bonus that you get for spending 20 or 25 bucks on a book that in addition to the book being enormously valuable.
So fabulous. Well, I can't wait to add these new things. I have to really delve into this in major detail so that I can add more ways that I use red light therapy. But I just, is there anything else before we end? I just can't thank you enough for all the work you've done. This is not a small project, but something that, yeah, was really, who knew? Who knew 7 years ago when I just brought that book back with me? I was like, oh, this is fascinating, like what it's turned into now. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Margie. And I hope that people got value from this, and I hope they'll be motivated to go buy the book and figure out what devices are best for their goals, and have, good quality evidence-based instruction on how to use it effectively.
yeah, and then I can't wait letting me know everybody what it's helped and what you've been able to use it for, because I'm always so interested in when we share something on a podcast and then I get the feedback. There's nothing better, Ari, than like, "Ah, my knee feels so much better because of I followed Ari Whitten's advice in the book." So that's the beauty of actually being a podcast host, which you do also, in terms of, spreading this information. So thank you so much. Always a pleasure. And I'm excited to see what happens in the world from this.
Yeah, thank you so much for getting me on short notice. I know you're about to take a trip to the Galapagos, and things are hectic for you right now. So thank you so much for rushing this episode to help get the message out.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much. Always a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Ari as much as I did, and now have a better understanding of red light therapy and how it can be used. His book is so amazing because he goes through all this and really gives you a roadmap on where to start, what to use, what's safe. And I just think it's so valuable because this red light has so many benefits that have been scientifically shown. So I just think it's a win-win. I'm always looking for new things that we can add that are easy to do and really make a difference. And I think it can help in terms of our bones in so many ways. But where I see when people have pain and it really prevents them from exercising, this is where I see it can be so valuable, as well as what he said, people recover better when they've done studies after exercise. So there's so many benefits, but I just see that as something that can directly help our community. Anyway, I just always appreciate everybody listening. And I just wanted to let you know, because some people don't know that I do have a membership. And every month we have a Q&A where we can discuss these things. We also have a guest expert and we also have a happiness workshop. So I'll put that in the show notes as well. And if you're interested, I'd love for you to join. We just have so much fun and we all learn from each other. So all the links that Ari talked about, his book will be in the show notes. And just thank you again for joining and being part of this community. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.